refresh this. No way it's not going. I love LinkedIn. There we go. Go live. Okay, here we are. Ben Edwards, welcome to Consulting Growth Insights Live. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, so I'm excited to chat with you because, like I put in the event description, I get to see, under the hood, if you will, of a good amount of companies, clients, prospects, just conversations I tend to have. I think through your work, you get to see many more than I do, not least of which because you get to see under the hood and kind of in your system and CMAP of what firms are doing. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the industry, lots of change, if you will. And I'd love to just kind of say, shoot the shit back and forth and tell you what I'm seeing, ask you what you're seeing, and make this as valuable as possible for listeners here in terms of what's working versus not working for.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting
boutiques.
into it, and also putting some questions back to you, Mike, because
Yeah,
you've undersold yourself there. I'm sure you get a huge ton of insight that's worth digging
you know
into.
what they say, under promise and over deliver, right?
Right.
At least to a certain extent. So, before we hit go live here, you and I were just chatting a little bit. Right now, I think there are definitely a push in a lot of firms from a business development perspective. Like some are doing better than others, but either way, there's some concern of, hey, where's the next project going to come from? Or the next, 5 projects, whatever it is, right? And we were talking about, where are firms maybe wasting their time on business development activity. And you brought up something interesting around developing new services, specifically AI-enabled or tech-enabled services. So let's start there. I think I'd be willing to bet that a lot of listeners are either trying this or thinking about it. I know I personally am and working on stuff, but that's neither here nor there. So tell me more. What are you seeing out there?
I don't want to alienate everybody by like putting an absolute kibosh on that concept. Like as a concept for delivering consulting services, obviously, making it as high leverage as possible by using technology and AI makes an absolute ton of sense. When we look at our platform and the data, which is sort of 700 boutique pro serve firms across the world, largely here in America and back in my original home, the UK. 99% of firms are still delivering project-based, and that is a combination of T&M, fixed bid, success fee, or retainer-based engagements. A very small percentage are doing anything outside of that, which usually, when I've seen it, gets sold as a subscription offering, a community offering, some sort of data access type play. So from a top line revenue perspective and a commitment of resource inside boutique consulting firms, it's still relatively small. I think the noise suggests that people are a lot further ahead than they are. And I think that has caused an element of panic in other firms because they think they're behind the 8 ball when they most definitely aren't. And actually, that's where I start seeing some mistakes being made from a BD perspective, where there's this rush to create a new service offering, highly AI and tech leveraged, but we've not thought about the price point, not thought about the delivery, not thought about ongoing support. And I guess just based on the data, maybe a little bit of comfort to everyone. It's all right, ease up. We've got there's a long time. It's a long game to play. Don't need to be rushing off and cannibalizing some of our service offerings right out the bat. That said, was that in Curb or was that Seinfeld? I can't remember.
No, so
But that said, it's still worth investing in
yeah,
researching those types of offerings for the long term.
yep. So what I'm curious, what are you seeing in terms of uh, maybe the firms that you get to see that are doing well,
Right.
let's say financially in general versus maybe not as well. How are they approaching this differently, or are they?
Yeah. So again, thinking about the data that we can see and some of the data that I outside of our platform have
Yeah,
access to, a lot of it does come down to financials. So when lots of people talk about success, they might think top line revenue, or they
yeah,
might think headcount. Success in for firms using our platform is like higher EBITDA, higher
yeah.
project margin. So on those sort of metrics, you could put them into a couple of different buckets and cohorts. There's those that have just incredibly tightly defined value propositions, niches that they operate in, and have absolutely mastered the art of running their firm efficiently.
Hmm.
Um, so they don't need to go chasing the next shiny object, because they are very much masters of their own destiny in their niche. Uh, and I think that can exist in lots of niches still. Um, Whatever geo, market, subsector that you operate in, if you've got all of those things and you can demonstrate huge value to your clients, you will be number one, and you will beat the big firms, not just your competitive boutiques and down market your silos. So that's something that I think a lot of people can aspire to based on the metrics. And then there's another cohort which are those types of consultancies that are just in the right space, which is lots about tech. Maybe they're
Yeah,
adjacent to one of these um, Goliath SaaS vendors that's going crazy, or an AI
yeah,
solution,
yeah,
and they've just got that combination of consulting and technical expertise spot on. They've not got there by accident though. The ones that are really successful, a number of them have been at this for a long time. 2022, they didn't just slap on an AI label and
yeah.
pivot. They have genuine expertise in their fields, and their financial success is very, very good at the moment.
Yeah, I do. I haven't encountered within any of my clients, at least, this like rush to build some sort of AI enabled service necessarily. They're all experimenting with it, and depending on what they're doing, they might be um, layering it in. So, for example, I recently worked with a offshore technical staffing firm, and one of the things that they're layering in is AI training and readiness for the people that they staff, which makes a lot of sense, actually, right? You want to staff the right
So,
types of people. And it, oh, by the way, fits their positioning, which is not just speed to seat of how quickly can we staff, but it's speed to value. How quickly can we place people that can add value to your firm for their ICP? Which again, that makes a lot of sense. I think as we're talking about this, like if you are going to chase it, if you will, and maybe chase isn't the right word, you need to ensure that you're doing it for the right reasons. Like if you're doing it because you're either A, desperate for net new revenue, which is a whole other topic I want to talk to you about, or B, that it's like, oh my God, we need to do this because everyone else is doing it. Um, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But if there's an actual fit, right, like you mentioned, these firms that are masters of their own destiny, they've already figured it out, then yeah, explore it because you're going to be able to um, layer it on in the right way. And most likely, you're not going to just build out a whole completely net new service, right? So, for example, for these guys, it wasn't a net new service in the sense of they've never done any sort of training and upskilling before. They were already doing that. This is just an add-on to, okay, well, the market needs this. We're already doing things like leadership training and whatever else. Let's layer this in, right? And makes a ton of sense. Versus, oh, let's build this net new, whatever, AI enabled, I don't know, diagnostic service or something, and you've never done anything like that before, and it's not tied into the rest of your service offering, and say, well, why are you doing that? Right.
When I've seen it successfully implemented, and it's when the consulting firm has first looked at what their end client really wants to buy and will get value from. And fortunately, they've figured out who that ICP is, and there's not thousands of them, there tends to just be hundreds. And those tend to have good sized wallets, so they're willing to pay for it. And if they all those stars align and they go, we can deliver some value, and our clients really want this particular offering. And the one I'm thinking about is a tech services consultancy aligned to a specific vendor in a specific niche, and even only limited to a couple of geos. And their clients desperately need not just the strategy and the implementation, they need like people in their business to be able to ask certain questions. AI pops up and it's based on text and it processes data and it outputs it in really strong processes. Oh, guess what? Like that really works, and that is an additional revenue stream and service that fits all of those things. But there's a number of stars aligning there for that to really play right now.
Yes, I mean, I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but I have seen, again, I don't have any clients in that space, but I've talked to plenty of folks that are doing this where, and then there's a good and the bad here, but they're starting to almost build out productized add-ons within big software ecosystems, whether that'll be, ERPs or CMSs or kind of, the major platforms. Or, you find like there's niche stuff like in whatever, say in banking, there are banking platforms, etc. But like there are big ecosystems of add-ons where if you are already, like you said in this case, partnered with a firm, like it's an actual implementation partnership, etc., that you have, and you've now developed something specific for the subset. Now could you at that point make it into a product? Yes, that actually makes a lot of sense. Versus, you and I were kind of talking about before, let's build a software product. That's always been a thing that consulting firms and agencies tend to want to do because like you said, they want the recurring revenue piece, and that sounds exciting. But it's just such a different model that it takes them completely off track from the core thing that's 100% of their revenue up until they launch the product.
I've seen and heard of so many anecdotal stories of the professional services firm who over the last decade wish they'd stuck to professional services rather than chase SaaS. And I'm sure AI is going to be that next shiny object that distracts so many founders and operators of boutique professional service firms who could have built something brilliant in the pro serve space, just like losing focus. And guess what? Like those firms that are killing it right now, they're all just delivering phenomenal value to big ticket paying clients, and it's a combination of like classic consulting with a little bit of tech. They've not gone hand over fist on AI, and they are, and by I'm like, they are doing everything everyone wants: growing top line revenue, hiring brilliant people, retaining fantastic staff, working with fantastic clients, delivering great projects, making money, building enterprise value. And you're like, oh, guess what? You're just doing the thing that every other successful firm has done over the past decade or so, but just hitting it on the head.
Yeah, like the focus on building enterprise value within your firm I think is a really important one. Like I think as a lens, I mean, it's not the only thing, but I think as a lens of how are we making decisions is a really, really important one that I tend to see it in firms that are very, and founders of firms that are very financially savvy. So I see it in folks in banking and financial services. Obviously, I don't see it as much outside of that, which is interesting. And maybe not that surprising either, but I think that having that lens of almost like two things. One, does this thing, whatever this thing that we want to invest in, does it support or detract from our core positioning, whatever that is? And then two, is this going to add, or do we see a path toward real enterprise value in this? If the answer is no and no, or even no on one of these, you should probably reconsider, or at least really think twice about it and understand, well, why is it no, and can we change that? Right? Are we just thinking about it incorrectly, or is this just a bad idea in the first place?
There's a number of ways you can create enterprise value now. Because, it used to be, well, one of our top KPIs that we recommend firms follow is the rule of 40, which is a combination of like EBITDA plus revenue growth.
For
But
those,
who's
just
to
really
say,
quick, for those who maybe have never heard of the Rule of 40, describe that. What's the value of it? Where'd it come from? That kind of thing.
I believe it actually came out of SaaS, and it was the rule of 60 in SaaS, which is how private equity or venture capital very quickly appraised how valuable a business was. So in the SaaS world, rule of 60 was take your profit margin expressed as a percentage, let's say 20%, and let's take your growth expressed as a percentage, let's say 40%. And if the 20 add the 40 equals 60, you're investable. So in ProServe, the rule of 40 is taking those same two parts of the equation, EBITDA, top line revenue growth. Are you a 30% EBITDA business but growing at 10%? Like, good, hit the rule of 40. And my point there was going to be, for a while, maybe like post-COVID, enterprise value was maybe more swayed towards like growth. But actually, like, if you can run your firm really effectively and increase that EBITDA, that's a really appealing piece when it comes to your next an investor, some sort of buyout, an MBO, whatever the transaction is that you want to go through. Yeah.
Quick little maybe detour here from what we talked about. I'm wondering, are you seeing any changes and trends right now in terms of that combination? So that rule of 40, obviously, it can go either way. In theory, right, you can have a really high growth firm that's investing a ton in growth, and because of that has a low EBIT, and still be at the rule. That could be 5% EBIT and and 35% growth. That still matches. Like, are you seeing any changes in those trends in terms of, because at one point it was like growth at all costs, if you will, and growth is kind of the primary marker of, are you going to get acquired or not, even in the professional services space. So have you seen that shift lately?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about the firms on our platform, EBITDA growth has been really strong, even if top line revenue hasn't been. In fact, quite a few firms maybe have even plateaued or gone a little backwards, but they've just got their finances in order. And I don't know them all individually, unfortunately, because there's a ton of them. I wish I did, but I bet a number of them have gone, right, we're going to batten down the hatches a little bit here, see what happens. Maybe they were in life sciences, or maybe they were in ecology and environmental, which might have taken a bit of a hit, and they've got, right, let's see what happens over the next year or two, and then we'll come back again, and then we'll look at what we do in the future.
Yep.
Which is sensible and fine and absolutely the way to play it, rather than like chase the next shiny object or like kill yourself trying to acquire customers that aren't a fit and you're going to lose money on.
Yep. Something I want to go back to really briefly is, so you kind of mentioned outside of tech and AI enablement, other revenue streams that firms are exploring, like community access or data access, or I've seen, because that's kind of community, but almost like a marketplace in terms of like connecting
Membership model.
vendors to whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of stuff.
Right.
What are you seeing there in terms of the firms that you get access to, if you will?
So actually, like in terms of our client base, not a ton. I think the more interesting piece is over a more sustained period, 4 or 5 years, there's been a strong move from time and materials to fixed bid and retainers. There is there are some businesses who are doing some success fees or outcome-based pricing, but I think it gets talked about a lot more than it actually comes into effect. And that I think is similar to what you're suggesting there. So I hear lots of people experimenting, wanting, desiring, but not necessarily actioning and getting anything from it.
Interesting. So you've in I guess in the data, and I know you've got a podcast and you talked to a lot of founders of firms. Am I understanding correctly that you're seeing a lot of people, a lot of firms experimenting with moving from the time and materials model, but they're not seeing success in terms of, does that mean an uptake, or it's affecting their EBITDA in a negative way? Like what are you seeing?
The move from time and materials to fixed bid is
To fixed bid.
yes.
Yeah.
That's going well, and the firms that are doing that are doing well. The experimentation or the talking about things is like community models, memberships.
Got
Yeah,
Got
but
it.
yeah.
So let's dig into that a little bit, because I'm a big fan of fixed bid, because that's sort of an easy entry point into value-based pricing, if you do it right. What have you seen from firms that have successfully made that shift? What do they need to do? What are the pitfalls? Things like that.
If you take it as a given that everything else I've talked about, like understanding your ICP, pitching to people that have got budgets and decent sized pockets, like take that as a actually then once you get into it and you want to move it, you've got to have gone through some sort of like work bank breakdown structure. You've got to have sort of understood the core components from a delivery perspective that make up the engagements. And if you've understood those things, you can price out a piece of work that would have previously been time and materials, and if nothing else, add on 5% from like a fixed bid perspective. That's your starting point.
Yeah.
On top of that, you want to go back and look at historicals and be ruthless with yourself and go, which of these projects did I sell and have lost money on? Or what have I sold and not made as much money on as I wanted? And in an ideal scenario, which have I sold and made more money on? And obviously get the lessons from that. So if that's really tactical and obvious, I'm sorry, but like that's the starting point to going from T&M to fixed bid value-based pricing.
Yeah, I think for sure, looking at your historical projects, because obviously even with T&M, a lot of them have limits on, hey, it's T&M, but it's max whatever this cost or whatever, or anything, if it's our fault, it's
you might get
we're eating it.
write-offs.
If it's incremental, then we do change orders, whatever, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
But I think definitely looking at over servicing and stuff like that, really understanding like that bottom up. The thing I like to look at is, and this is where what I see successful firms doing is having a really deep understanding of the actual commercial value they are bringing to their clients, because that allows you to go, instead of bottom up, top down of, okay, well, our cost to deliver this is X, but on a typical project like this, we deliver 10X the value. So whatever it costs $1 million, they get 10 million out of it. All right, well, maybe we should charge 2 million.
Right. Well, this is why I like listening to people like yourself, because we've got a platform like ours, which is very much like your bottom up fundamentals, and then you've got people like you that are understanding what it is about happening in the market dynamics, value, and investment, and you do both, right?
Yeah, I think doing the bottom up and the top down. I mean, that's kind of your basics of budgeting, even too, right? You do top down to based on your targets, and you do bottom up to see if it's realistic, and you go from there. Because that's the other thing too, is sometimes they don't match the other way, which is, okay, well, this typically costs $1 million and they usually get $1.5 million in value. Well, now you potentially have a problem, right? So your goal of charging 2 million for this is probably not realistic, and unless you figure out a way to, like, what's the problem? Why are we not driving more value? You know,
It's the other thing that can come up when business moves from T&M to fixed bid, and then they put in fixed bids with their clients, and all of a sudden their clients can maybe get a little bit reticent, and maybe let's say hypothetically the win rate drops, and therefore your top line revenue drops. Well, then you can at least look in your business and go, well, we must have not been making as much money as we wanted in those T&M projects because we priced the fixed bid price at a similar or slightly higher. What do we do with our cost base? Like, what do we actually do to deliver something that somebody's willing to pay for, but still maintain a healthy margin?
Yeah. Well, and I think
that
the other
doesn't happen
thing,
quite so frequently, though. I found so many boutiques are actually probably like underpriced, and they go from T&M to fixed bid, and they realize, hang on, like there is more scope,
Yep.
and there is an opportunity to increase our revenue and our margin. It's limiting beliefs, it's process that has like held them back. Genuinely,
I think
that's
I've definitely seen it where firms make that shift, and all of a sudden, actually, their close rate increases because people go, "Oh, well, there's a cap here, and it's sounds good." You know, that's
right.
technically what, you know, I think about and talk about everything in terms of risk. By switching to fixed bid, you are taking on more risk as the firm, and your client is going to be like, "Okay, cool." To a
But
certain extent,
here's
right?
another thing that I see happen quite a bit. People make that move from T&M to fixed bid, but then they almost let the salespeople determine what the price is that they can sell that engagement for, and then they can get away with like essentially, doing what they want. There's no controls around that pricing, and it all just starts completely falling out of kilter as soon as they make that move. So it's when you make that move, you still want to understand the real time and expense that goes into it, so that you can not let people
100%.
sort of like, But that happens quite a bit, Mike. I know you're looking at me as if to say, oh, but that does happen a
No,
fair bit.
I've especially in larger firms, like it probably, well, tell me if I'm
Right.
wrong.
Bad practice sort of creeps in as you scale. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, if you've got, you know, call it a 50 to 100 person firm where you've got,
Right.
you know, it's not just the founders and the partners selling potentially.
Yeah.
It's, you know, or if it is, it's, you know, you've got, you know, 10 partners, you know, that are responsible for it, and everyone kind of, and there is no rules, and everyone just goes, okay, well, I've got my revenue quota I need to hit. That's what my incentive is based on. All right, well, I'll discount this to just to be able to sell and hit my quota. And that's where I think
That's
the
where it
other,
comes in, comp based on revenue rather than margin.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. I think if I had to bet, and tell me if I'm wrong, the successful firms have their incentives really dialed in.
Yeah, they do.
Especially
I
if
know
they're in
plenty.
this shift for, you know, in terms of revenue model and things like that.
Right. I know plenty of firms that over time, as they've grown, have moved from a commission based on whatever the deal value is to maybe a 50-50 split. Like maybe some of it's still based on top line revenue, because you don't want to disincentivize people going to market and doing some of the hard yards in terms of winning business. We know that's not easy, but then making sure that once the project is going, you're still checking back in with the delivery team who, you know, actually trying to get this engagement over the line that you've sold. Let's make sure it's on track margin wise.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, you know, what you kind of mentioned in terms of salespeople, whether they're partners or actual dedicated biz dev, that are kind of tasked with setting prices, I think I agree that that's a big miss, where in theory, right, who should own pricing? It should be marketing. Now, the problem is a lot of these firms don't actually have a real marketing department. They say they do, but it's like a marketing director that doesn't actually have anything more than your typical promotional skill set, if you will. Right. And then who's responsible? Well, you have some of the partners that come together, they figure it out, and then the salespeople just get to do whatever they want. Where in reality, you have to align all of these, make sure your COO or head of delivery is in the conversation, right? To help with the bottom up, you do your top down based on your, forecasts and all that. And then look at, again, your account managers, if you have that function, or again, your partners, if you don't have a dedicated AM function, look at the actual performance and the value delivery and say, okay, let's align on what this thing should cost now. Right. And then on top of that, you pilot it. Right. That's the other thing. You don't just go, hey, we're going to roll it out to everybody.
Right. Yeah. But this is where like the exponents of productized service have got it right.
Yeah.
In terms of once you've done that and you've built a proposition and a product, if you will, you can broadly rinse and repeat. And the other great thing about that is often, if you can design one that's relatively low lift, it's the way now that it's getting people's foot in the door with clients, rather than these huge, massive engagements that take forever to discover and understand and then pitch and then win. It's like, right, what's our little productized service getting through the front door offering? That's another little thing I'm seeing working quite effectively at the moment, particularly in this market where the buyers of services are also starting to judge, hang on, can we use AI instead of a consulting? Which is, sorry to go off on another, but that's where the big firms are definitely going to struggle. But the boutiques can win, which is to bring it back around to try and tie a whole loop together, which is why I think lots of boutiques don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to their service delivery. I think there's a way bigger prize through the crumbling of the Goliaths that boutiques are really well positioned to tap into without having to do anything completely crazy, because I think buyers are going to make different types of decisions which just lend themselves more to boutiques.
So let's maybe take a quick segue here, just because you mentioned the crumbling of the Goliaths, right? And I think we've definitely seen a lot of media
Headlines
on like, oh, the consulting industry is dying, whatever, all that kind of stuff. And I know that's not what you're saying.
No.
I'm curious, what are you actually seeing there? And I say that because one of the things I do in my work is I consistently interview buyers, right, in a variety of industries. And again, I've done a number of them recently, whether it be in the life sciences space or the banking space or the software space, and across the board. More so, I would say, in the regulated industries like life sciences and financial services than tech, but even there, for sure in the regulated spaces, I still consistently come across this idea of in general, like if you ask them to use boutique firms, I love boutique firms. And then when you really dig into it, like, but only for specific things in these types of situations. And really, as long as I'm not going out on a limb for them because I'm not willing to risk my, personal reputation. And I hear this from, bank CFOs to VPs of R&D to, CEOs of, emerging biotech, like, and everything in between. Like I've heard this consistently for years and I'm still hearing it. So setting the stage there, what are you actually seeing on this, like, the crumbling of the Goliaths and the boutiques being able to...
Genuinely are seeing boutiques winning more opportunities where some of those big firms are involved than ever before, seeing them win opportunities where the big four just didn't even get a sniff. But because of that, what I think you said one thing, almost like the negative view of being pigeonholed is you can only do one specific thing. But like the flip side is if you can only do that one specific thing, ding, 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 that's a win. So yeah, just from our data, from seeing some of our firms' pipelines and where they're winning and what they're winning and where they're growing and where they're focusing on, it's a good opportunity. And when I see the headlines, consulting is dead, that's very broad brush. I unashamedly only really care about the boutiques, which is just a percent.
Me too.
Like,
So I hear you.
yeah. So, like, that's they're winning, and they
Yeah.
will win. I think that I was saying to somebody today.
What are they doing to win? I'm kidding. Like, sorry to interrupt you, but what are they doing to win? Like, what are you seeing maybe that's
I think
new or
structure,
different?
just right from the off, structurally they are set up to deliver better value for the same type of client that those Goliaths would have been winning, because they don't have the layers and the layers and the bureaucracy, and the world is moving so fast. They are streamlined and nimble. And I think lots of consultancies will, rightly so, point to like specialist expertise. And I get that, and you want to publicize that. But I also think just like speed of movement and being easy to work with and delivering value really, really quickly and not switch and baiting. And all of these things play into them doing great work and winning business. The world is smaller and flatter than ever before. Like, you can build a reputation in a niche very, very quickly if you connect the dots between
Yeah.
different people and you're getting referrals in a little niche. You can make those. And now, obviously, there's always going to be certain work that has to be won by the bigger firms if it needs
Yeah.
scale or a certain logo stamped on it. But there
Yeah.
is more than enough of other work for boutiques to be rinsing the Goliaths of.
Yeah, I think that last part that you mentioned is definitely key in terms of knowing where you should compete. I think a lot, maybe not a lot, but many firms I see, they want these like, oh, we could have done that. I'm like, yeah, you could have, right? But for you, would have required you to pull a whole bunch of subcontractors in, do all this stuff, and get a bunch of people on site or, whatever, something like that. That's a deal that's focused on, it's built on scale, and like scale is the need. Scale, speed, and speed from like, hey, how quickly can we get these people up and running? Like, you
Yeah,
can't act like, could you have done it? Yes, but you can't really compete from a, how safe does that person feel on the other side? Because they know that you don't have these people on staff. All they got to do is look at your LinkedIn or whatever. Like, and even if they don't, once they see the contract, they'll know. Right. And if you hide it for them, that's even worse, like all this kind of stuff. So like knowing where to compete is so important. It's like, don't worry about the fact that they're winning those deals. Let them win those deals. But
right.
knowing where your core expertise is actually the value is so important. The other thing, I'm curious if you've seen this too. My sample size is too small to say this is statistically significant, but observationally, were the firms that I've seen thrive right now are the ones that are where the founders and the partners have come from industry rather than consulting,
Ooh,
where they're able to have the conversation around like, hey, we've sat in your seat before, and oh, by the way, so have the majority of the people that we have on staff.
and that's
Versus, because I've seen other historically in the past, it's been, hey, we're just going to hire X MBB and X Big Four people, right? And that's worked, I think, in the past, especially if you're trying to compete on the scale type deals, if you're a bigger firm, like a bigger boutique. But the smaller boutiques that really have that niche industry expertise because they've done the work on the other side, those are the firms I'm seeing be successful as long as they have great business development skills and processes and a really clear and solid positioning. If you have those three things, they're still, up and to the right for the most part. Unless they're in an industry that's tanking, that's a little bit different. But even then, they're usually at least flat because they're able to preserve.
I wish I had some data on that, because that's a really that'd be really interesting to dig into. I know cases of some firms who have been set up by people who've come out of big firms and they've done well. And by well, I mean like they've been profitable, they've got an exit, that sort of thing.
Yep.
More on the anecdotal bit, like I did an in-person event with about 45, 50 US consulting leaders quite a few months ago now. Because I was about to lay into the big firms and the Goliaths, I was like, hey, before I do that, have any of you come from one of those firms before I start going in? And only one person raised their hand. So I was like, right, that's fair game. So out of that sample size, maybe you're onto something.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I think, again, I've seen the same thing. Right? It's not that every single firm that started with people who have come from, the big firms is not going to be successful. That's
No.
not true either by any means. And nor is the flip side, right? It's not, I
Right.
don't think it's definitely correlation maybe rather than causation at this point, I would say. But I think it seems like there's an influence. And again, I've seen it in biotech where it's former multi-time biotech execs that they started multiple firms, they've sold them, and now they're in their 40s and 50s, they've done it multiple times, like, yeah, I don't really want to do that whole thing, let me consult, right? And they bring in their other friends that have also been in it, and all of a sudden you get a team of 3 partners that have done it from different, one's legal and regulatory, one's product development, one is whatever, and now you've got a full quote unquote full service, biotech consulting firm. So I've seen the same thing in financial services, I've seen it in engineering, etc. Right now, again, there's definitely selection bias here. So that's why I was bringing that up. One thing
do you know what I would do? Think about it, like if I was younger, and I wish I was, and I wasn't so embedded in SaaS, and I was in professional services. If I was junior or midweight in one of those huge Goliaths, I would not be looking at like long-term partner track. I would be going, how can I use my soft skills that I've gained here and my experience in the brand stamp to get into a really cool boutique that was like onto something, and then work my way up that way would be what I would be thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen people do that. It all depends on what people want.
What floats your boat.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things I want to jump into a little bit is you mentioned, I think in the example you shared, the reference was to partnerships. I think right now, for sure, I think having an understanding and access to the right ecosystem is really, really critical. Because I think it's really hard to win, deals cold, if you will. Not impossible, but hard. So what have you seen? I don't know if you have any data on this in terms of like correlation in terms of firms that are growing versus struggling, whether they're using partnerships, what kinds of partnerships, or even if it's anecdotal. Like I'm curious what you've seen.
Again, wish I did have more data on that specifically. We do have lots of data, but you raised a couple of points that are maybe slightly out. But again, some more anecdotal ones for you. So, interviewed quite a few founders who will say that is a pivotal part of what has enabled their go-to-market to really start humming, particularly inside of like specific SaaS vendors or tech vendors, and where the AEs and the salespeople in those businesses are essentially their go-to-market. And some of them, honestly, have absolutely mastered it.
What are they doing? What are the successful firms doing with their partnerships? Because I think you kind of hear, especially for the smaller firms.
The 3 examples that I can think of, and they're all people who I've managed to speak to.
Yep.
They're just really good salespeople, and they knew that was going to be their go-to-market, and they, without knowing the intricacies of how they're selling in their business, but like they've like built the decks that enable sales reps to sell on their behalf. They understand the customer and like where the partner component play nicely together. They've probably got some really good incentives around it. They've got a cadence of activity and repetition to build it out. Just really good sales fundamentals. Sorry if that's not much use, but
No, so I
that
mean,
all
let's dive into that a
all
little bit
three.
in terms of, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying they're from a business development perspective, they have made it easy for the AEs of these software vendors to bring them into deals.
Right. Yeah. There's
Okay.
there's there's one in like a cybersecurity space I know.
Yeah.
There's one in like this hot CRM space that I know, and there's one in like agile development. And all three of them, that's the sort of like commonality that I
Mhm.
would draw. And again, small sample size, but
Yep.
they're all doing
Well,
well.
so tactically, well, I mean, you kind of mentioned, they've got, they've created pitch decks, or they've provided them with content
Yeah.
that they can easily layer in whatever when they're making their sale. What else? Like, what else have you heard that they're doing successfully to make these partnerships work?
I think like they're just all three of them have got a really good understanding of what the end customer wants from
Mm.
both parts of the partnership. So there's never like any stepping on toes. It's almost like they're like joined at the hip. They're singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not like a logo on a website. Oh, we're their partner, and occasionally we put in a call and do a little bit of business.
Yeah.
It's like they're delivering that bit of tech, and we're delivering all of the services around it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Something interesting. And again, I definitely advocate for this, but I was just on the phone with a client yesterday, and they we're just working on their go-to-market strategy, and the CEO mentioned that he was talking to one of their software partners, and they specifically brought up the fact that, like, oh well, we need content, so if you've got content, we'll distribute your content. Which I've definitely, I always advocate for. I mean, honestly, stuff like this. Let's co-create some stuff. Let's co-market things. Whether it's formal or informal, I don't even care, at least to start with. I'm curious. Have you? I don't know if you've had conversations about that with folks.
100%. And when you think about the way that marketing is going and the proliferation of AI generated content, whether that be written, audio, video, like anything original where you are co-creating something and there's personality, there's a human. I weirdly think that will be a differentiator, because you can already sense it.
Yeah.
And people are already like turned off by it. In fact, that's been an amazingly quick
Mm-hmm.
like peaks, because I've been really tempted. I've got to be honest.
Yeah.
I do podcasts and webinars and written content and LinkedIn posts, and it takes me forever. But it's so tempting to just go down the AI path, but
Yeah.
it gets sniffed out so quickly. So yeah,
Oh yeah.
created content, all for
Yeah.
it.
I mean, I'm always, that's one place where I experiment just to see what the platforms are able to do.
Right.
My It's still like the main, not quick little tangent, I guess. The main thing that still is always missing is the lived experience, right?
Right.
And I do think there's probably a way, not probably, I'd be willing to bet there's a way to fix that, at least to a certain extent. But you have to literally record every single conversation you have, and
Yeah.
then
I'd be
over
surprised if it's not
time,
far off.
the
Right.
stories that you tell will, like, the context will be there and whatever. And that's where, like, having context libraries, etc. But like, that's the thing that's always missing. That's the part I'm like, yeah, this is fine, but it just reads blah. And the only way it makes sense is if I tell you about this conversation that I had with a CEO 3 days ago that references that brings this to life, right? Otherwise, it's whatever. It's just,
Right. And
it's
AI
theory,
can't do tangents like we've done tangents. I mean,
right? Not
we've
yet.
covered
Yeah, yeah. I like, it can tell you, like, oh, this will be a good place to, um, uh, a good
snip it
place
up and
to, yeah,
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 distribute. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, so, all right. One last thing here before we wrap up. From a metrics perspective, I'm going to bring it back to that real quick.
Yeah.
Um, What, you mentioned the rule of 40. What else are you seeing that maybe the successful firms are doing versus the ones that are struggling or missing, both from a metrics perspective and kind of how that connects to the activity that they're doing?
Yeah, so there's obvious ones like EBITDA, project margin, utilization. I think right now the interesting areas around pipeline, and not just pipeline value, and not even AOV, but
Yeah.
you've got to be analyzing sort of like your close win to loss rate, your speed from proposal to closed won, and tying all of those in and seeing if there's any trends there. Because anecdotally, right, you hear bigger deals are getting pushed out. You're having to multi-thread lots of different stakeholders with more intensity than ever before. And if that's the case, that's going to be linked to your cash flow, because obviously if that doesn't close, you're not able to get your bills out the door. Is that going to impact like what you do from a hiring perspective, bonuses? There's a cascade, isn't there, from that. So right now, being timely, I think those businesses that are performing well are combining a few different metrics around their pipeline to understand what the health of their business is like. What about you? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I would 100% agree, because I've had a number of conversations where, you ask people, how's your pipeline? They're like, great. We've got whatever, 5 million in pipeline. All right. How many deals is that? 4. I'm like, okay. Are they all equal size? No. 2 of them are like 80%. I'm like, so what's your win rate? 30%. Like, so it's possible you're going to lose both those big ones. Uh-huh. Okay. If that happens, what does your cash flow look like otherwise? Oh, that's going to suck. We're going to have to let people go. That means your pipeline's not that healthy. And I'm exaggerating slightly to make the point, but I think it's this historically, I do think there's this change that we're seeing of, in general, like, deals are taking longer and deal sizes are smaller. And there's obviously some nuance to that for sure, depending on industry, et cetera. But if you look at those overarching trends, then should you really be spending your time chasing the whale deal, or should you be focused on what's my quickest path in to show quick ROI to a net new client, or to an existing client if it's in an enterprise setting, to a new division of that client, right? Because oftentimes those are like net new deals anyway.
And also, if you're one of those businesses that has got quite a prolific cross sales or upsell or extension motion, and maybe you're not big on biz dev, completely new logo, like it wins for you just getting those foots in the door. And I know everyone's panicking because they want to book revenue and they want to book bigger engagements, longer engagements, because of what's going on in the market. But I think going in with a smaller, well-defined offering and getting your foot through the door. Again, if I look at some of our clients, a lot of our clients are boutiques. They're on the smaller side. Then they will have something like that to get in and then land and expand.
Yep. Well, I think that's probably a good place for us to wrap up. I know that you got to run. I got to run as well, and maybe we need to do a part 2 here.
Hey, Mike, you are more welcome on my poddy. Thanks for dropping it a reference every now and again. So yeah, I'll definitely return the favour, and we can cover some new ground and maybe tackle some old ground in greater depth. But it's been good fun.
That sounds like fun. And where can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. If you search Ben Edwards and then CMAP, or if you're on Apple or Spotify, Consulting Pulse.
Awesome. All right. One last thing is, what's one thing that maybe people should be thinking about that we did not get to discuss yet? Could be a lead into our next discussion.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I actually got this. I'll be honest with you. I got this from a colleague because I was talking about coming on here and like what's everybody in the business learned that I can bring to the table, and like it's a really niche one, but I think your audience will appreciate it because we're into the niches. And I really struggle with how lots of firms look at billable utilization, and it was getting his like grinding his gears a bit, because lots of businesses don't take into account like non-billable activity, and therefore a business that's doing 80% utilization is seen more favorably than a firm that's doing 60. And anyway, that was the thing that like was getting on his nerves. So I thought that would be one thing I could potentially share. And I've got so many insights from firms that are both ends of the spectrum but still performing well.
Yeah, I think a focus on more operational metrics might be interesting for a next chat for sure.
Yeah, very good.
Awesome.
Cool. Thanks,
All right,
Mike.
Ben. It's great chatting with you.